Lesson number 5 from episode 47 with Dr. Trish Lee, the neuroscience of porn addiction. This has become fundamental and foundational in our work at Rebuild Recovery. Your healing process, your recovery process from porn addiction is a two-step process. We must have an offensive and defensive strategy. The language that Trish used in this episode is the process of healing from a porn addiction requires you unwiring the old patterns of behavior and rewiring new patterns of behavior. What we must realize is we have conditioned ourselves and programmed ourselves that when certain events and things happen within our life, our default method of handling these things is to seek out and escape with the use of pornography. We must unwire that, which means when those same life events happen, we must stop doing those things and we must recreate new patterns of behavior. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back this week to another amazing, guys, very, very exciting episode of the Superhuman Life. As always, before we dive into today's episode, let me take a quick moment and remind you how incredibly grateful and thankful we are to have you here with us today. I am your host, Coach Frank Rich. Guys, we are at an incredible milestone here today. We're bringing a special episode of the Superhuman Life podcast to you. We don't have a guest joining us today. It's going to be flying solo here with just me and you. And I'm so excited to dive into this episode and share 10 lessons, 10 takeaways from 250 episodes of living a superhuman life. Yes, we have reached the milestone that so few podcasts ever reach. 250 episodes coming up on 5 years of conversations, of insights, of strategies, of tactics, of lessons to help you level up in those 5 key areas of life, break through the glass ceiling, and ultimately go on to create your own superhuman life. So yes, what I'm going to be sharing with you today are the 10 lessons, not the only 10 lessons, but 10 lessons that I was able to gather over the last 5 years of interviewing the world's leading experts on psychology, on addiction, on relationships, on health, on fitness, on biohacking. So we're going to dive into these here today, guys. I'm going to give you some of the insights, some of the takeaways. Have these lessons have transformed me, transformed my life, and transformed many of the things that we're doing in our organizations here with the Superhuman Life, and more importantly, with the work that we're doing with Rebuild Recovery and helping men break free from the shackles of pornography addiction. You know, I think back to 2019, July of that year, in launching this podcast and embarking on this journey with you and I here together. I didn't know what this was going to grow, transform, and evolve into. I had a calling on my heart. I had a story that I felt I needed to share, but I had no clue of where it was going to lead us to. I didn't know that this was going to turn into a coaching organization. I didn't know that when I started to share my story of breaking free from a 20-plus year pornography addiction, the level of impact that it was going to have on men across the world. But I'm so grateful that I took that leap of faith back in 2019. And I'm so honored to be with you on a weekly basis, providing insights, providing value to you. So if you're getting tremendous value out of these episodes, guys, if you could take a quick moment, pause this episode right now, make sure to hit that subscribe button. But more importantly, if you could take a moment here this week and leave us a 5-star rating and written review on Apple, Spotify, wherever you're consuming these episodes. And if you're watching on the YouTube, make sure to hit that subscribe button, guys. We've seen some tremendous growth over the last couple of months with our YouTube subscriber base. And it's all because of you guys out there supporting the show, but more importantly, sharing this episode. I think I mentioned this last week episode that we can double the reach of the show if every single one of you watching and listening right now would take this episode and share it with just one person. We could literally double the reach, double our listenership, double our downloadership by you out there sharing it with just one person. If every single person listening and watching right now shared it with one person, tomorrow we would have double the viewership. So we're going to get into the lessons, guys. And these are not the only 10 lessons. I got to tell you, in 250 conversations, I have learned and taken something away from every single conversation. You know, I was having a great conversation the other day with a great friend of mine. And we were talking about podcasting and the impact that's had on me and the impact that's had on his life. He runs a very large organization and a very large, successful podcast. And he and I both agreed that having these conversations, doing this work has contributed to more growth more personal development than anything else I've invested in. I've read hundreds of books on personal development, on human nature, on psychology, on entrepreneurship, on business, on marketing. I've spent close to six figures on my own personal development with coaches, masterminds, mentorship, seminars, events, courses. But standing in front of this microphone, being able to ask the questions that drive me, being able to go underneath the content that is written in a book with the author that wrote the book has contributed to more growth in the last 5 years than I had to tell you anything that I've ever done. So these 10 lessons are lessons that obviously I got from the conversations that I took away. So some of them are going to be a clear bullet point, something that a guest said on a conversation. Other lessons are going to be a summary of the conversation that I had with a particular guest. And some of them are going to be summaries that I got from multiple guests and how it all runs consistent. Now, like I said, this is not the only 10 lessons, and I'm not even prioritizing these in a top 10. So don't think that these are the top 10 lessons that I've taken away. These are the ones that ring most consistent in my life, in our work. They're the ones that we've been able to extract out of the podcast and maybe apply it into our coaching organization. Maybe apply it into the work that we do with helping men. Maybe apply it into some of the consulting work that we've done with other individuals as well. So like I said, they're not the top 10. They're not in any particular order, but they are the 10 that have run most consistent with me over the last 5 years. So we're going to dive in, guys. I'm going to share with you the tip, the lesson, the tactic, the episode that it was listened on. And we're going to link every single one of these episodes below. So maybe there's going to be something that you hear in this episode. You hear one of these takeaways and you want to go follow up and listen to that entire conversation. If you click down there in the show notes, we're going to have every single episode linked up for you. But let's get into it, guys. 10 lessons from living a superhuman life over the last 5 years, 250 episodes. Lesson number 1 was taken from episode 62 back in 2021, February 2021, with Dave Asprey. Fast This Way to Unlock Your Superpowers with Dave Asprey. This was right after he wrote and was on the book tour for his book, Fast This Way. Something that David shared on that podcast. Now, by this point in my journey, I had been practicing fasting pretty regularly and consistently for about 3 years. We had integrated into our coaching by that point already, and the men that we were working with, Rebuilt Recovery, were using fasting to break free from addiction. So we understood the spiritual benefits. We understood the growth-centric benefits. We understood how to use fasting to build discipline, to build willpower. But when Dave said fasting is the ultimate biohack, that shook me, because here is the godfather of biohacking. When we think biohacking, we think red light sauna therapy, we think cold plunging, we think electrodes plugged into your ears while you're sleeping, we think blackout curtains, we think certain temperatures, we think utilizing specific supplements. But when I asked him, what's the biggest fast or what's the biggest biohack that people can walk away with right now? What is the one thing that you would recommend to anybody that is trying to get into fasting or trying to get into biohacking? He said, Frank, fasting is the ultimate biohacking. Now, obviously, he was on the tour for a book written on fasting at the time, so he may be somewhat biased there. But when he talked about how fasting was a way to increase our willpower, because willpower is nothing more than having the necessary energy to make the proper decisions when faced with a difficult time. We've seen this play out in the work with men at Rebuilt Recovery, is that when we can lean into some of the discomfort, we can grow in our discipline, we can grow in our willpower, we can grow in our spiritual enlightenment. But in fact, reserving some of the energy that your body takes to process food will allow you to make better decisions. So guys, if you are not having a regular fasting practice in your life right now, start with a 2-day fast. Start with going on a 40 to 48 hour spiritual test for yourself. Begin to practice weekly, day-long fast in you. Begin to, on a once a quarter basis, go 3 to 5 days. Test, challenge yourself. See what you are capable of with fasting. Because according to Dave Asprey, episode 62, fasting is the ultimate biohack. Lesson number 2, I'm going to go back to a very recent episode 230 with Bodhi Aldrich, finding freedom in your own hero's journey. In this episode with Bodhi, we were talking about the dynamics between the masculine and the feminine, and how when those are operating and in sync with each other, a relationship is like a river flowing. Now, the analogy that Bodhi shared here is that in that river, in that relationship that is flowing seamlessly, the masculine source, the masculine energy, the man within that relationship must operate and show up as the river bank. Okay. He provides the structure for the river. The feminine is going to be the water flowing through the river. Now, here's the takeaway, gentlemen, is your woman is going to be water whether or not you provide the riverbank to her, which means water without structure will go wherever it wants to go. But you put the structure in the frame of a riverbank up for that water, it will control that water flowing in the direction that it wants to go. The masculine is the riverbank and the feminine is in the water. And when those are in sync, working together, your life, your relationships, your connection, your intimacy with your partner should flow as seamlessly as a river flowing down the creek. The masculine is the riverbank. Episode 230, Finding Your Freedom in Your Own Hero's Journey with Bodie Aldridge. Next lesson. And this is an episode that if you haven't yet listened to, it's quickly rising up as our number one downloaded episode. What it's done on the YouTube, what it's done on social is it's reached a few million people with its various clips. But it was episode 218 with the legend himself, the OG, the GOAT, Stan Efferding, how to eat, sleep, and train to build muscle and burn fat. We've had a lot of conversation around the importance of sleep, about optimizing sleep environments, about the role that sleep plays in recovery. But Stan had a statement. If you're waking up at 5 a.m. after 4 hours of sleep to do your cardio, you're stepping over dollar bills to pick up pennies. Now, I fell into this trap myself as a competitor and as a bodybuilder. As a young man in my 20s and even in my early 30s, I would have no problem operating on 4-5 hours of sleep. I always bought into the belief that more is better. More work, more training, more cardio, more reps, more sets. But as I've gotten older, as I've gotten into my 40s, I've realized the importance of prioritizing sleep. So many people will cut their rest, cut their recovery, cut their sleep short to get up and go to the gym for a half hour, hour long, 90-minute training session. When in reality, getting this sleep, allowing your body to rest, restore itself, repair itself, will have better long-term lasting effects for your health, for your wellness, for your optimization, and more importantly, your fat loss. You're waking up at 5 a.m. after 4 hours of sleep to do your cardio. You are stepping over dollar bills to pick up pennies. Stan Efferding, episode 218, How to Eat, Sleep, and Train to Build Muscle and Burn Fat. Lesson number 4, we're going to dive into the concept or the topic of trauma. We've had a lot of conversations around trauma, the role that trauma plays in our relationships, that it plays in our addiction, that it plays in our mental health. But in episode 136, my great friend, Ani Yach, our trauma is a story we tell ourselves. One of the key lessons here is that trauma is nothing more than the story that we tell ourselves about a perceived loss of control in a particular situation. And Annie walks us through, and you want to check this episode out. She walks us through how to go back in time and speak to ourselves. So if we have trauma that we're holding on to from our childhood, if we have trauma that we're holding on to from a previous relationship, what we've done is we've created a story about that situation, about that particular incident that we lost control. And the losing of the control, the perceived losing of control in that situation has created a traumatic state. Now, I'm not talking about big T here. I'm talking about little t, the traumas that people hold on to that truly hold them back and keep them shackled into limiting beliefs, into limiting mindsets. Now, if we could go back in time and talk to that younger version of ourselves, we can recreate the perception of that story. Episode 136, Our Trauma is a Story That We Tell Ourselves. Lesson number 5. This was early on within the first year of the podcast. Lesson number 5 from episode 47 with Dr. Trish Lee, the neuroscience of porn addiction. This has become fundamental and foundational in our work at Rebuild Recovery. Your healing process, your recovery process from porn addiction is a 2-step process. We must have an offensive and defensive strategy. The language that Trish used in this episode is the process of healing from a porn addiction requires you unwiring the old patterns of behavior and rewiring new patterns of behavior. What we must realize is we have conditioned ourselves and programmed ourselves that when certain events and things happen within our life, our default method of handling these things is to seek out and escape with the use of pornography. We must unwire that, which means when those same life events happen, we must stop doing those things and we must recreate new patterns of behavior. Now, we've had Trish on the episode or on the podcast now twice, but this was from the first one, episode 47, the neuroscience of porn addiction. The process is twofold: offensive and defensive. Lesson number 6 is something that I've known. It's something that I've been at the forefront of, and which is why we are doubling down on what we're doing here with the podcast. But it is from episode 201 with Jeremy Ryan Slate, founder of Command Your Brand. We had a conversation around decoding truth from fiction in the evolution of media. And Jeremy and I both agree that the mainstream media as we know it is dying right before us. The future of media, the future of content creation is what you're hearing right now. It's alternative media sources. It's no longer the big corporations. It's individual content creators. The podcasting sphere, the podcasting medium is the future of all media, both on the audio side and every day the video side of podcasting is growing. So if you aren't yet, make sure to check us out on podcasting on the YouTube channel, The Superhuman Life. But podcasting is the future of media. Episode 201, Decoding Truth from Fiction with Jeremy Ryan Slate. Lesson number 7 is an entire framework of understanding our intimate relationships. It was with my great friend, Tony DiLorenzo, episode 143, Heal Your Relationships with the 6 Pillars of Intimacy. This has been one of the most referenced episodes since the beginning. Understanding the importance of these 6 pillars in our relationships with ourselves, in our relationships with our male friends, and more importantly, in our relationships, in our intimate relationships. 6 pillars of intimacy: physical intimacy, sexual intimacy, emotional intimacy, recreational intimacy, financial intimacy, and spiritual intimacy. Are we making sure that we're prioritizing and being intentional about checking the box in every single one of those areas in all of our relationships, whether it's the relationship with ourselves, the relationships with our coworkers, the relationship with our brothers, or the relationships with the women in our life? 6 pillars of intimacy, episode 143, Heal Your Relationships with Tony DiLorenzo. Lesson number 8, going back just a few weeks ago to an episode with my new friend, but great friend, Mark Lobliner. Mark is the CEO of MTS Nutrition, the founder of Legacy at Carbon, IFBB pro bodybuilder, husband, father, entrepreneur. Episode 247, Building a Legacy and Leaving a Positive Impact. When I asked Mark what living a Superhuman life meant to him, it was legacy over everything. Legacy, that's all that matters, guys. We're all here for a limited time. 80 years, 100 years, maybe if we're lucky. We have an opportunity, though, to leave a lasting impact through our families, through those that we impact with our work. Are we thinking about what we do on a daily basis? Our work, our conversations, those are shaping others, leaving a positive impact, but more importantly, building a legacy that stands beyond us. Now, I love the African proverb: the 3 things that all men should do is have a son, write a book, and plant a tree. And all 3 of those speak to the importance of leaving a legacy behind you. Your time will come where you are no longer here, but the seed that you leave behind you with the men that you speak into, the work that you leave behind you, and the words that you speak are the words that you write. And we know trees can last for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years. So are you focused and intentional about the legacy that you're leaving behind you? Lesson number 9 is a lesson that came from a handful of conversations, and it came from insights that I was having in our day-to-day work. But I can remember in the first conversation that I discussed this with Stephen Pressfield back in the 60s. So we're going on 4+ years now. Then I brought it up with Mark Effinger, founder of Newtopia. And then I had it reconfirmed with Kashif Khan on episode 151, where we took a deep dive into understanding our DNA. And the lesson here is that there's a clear and definitive link between high performance and addiction. Pressfield talked about how creative types, artists, high performers, musicians, creators, actors can easily fall into addiction if they are not harnessing that creative ability. Mark talked about his experience of being an addict, but how it was the same traits within him that made him very susceptible to addiction, that made him an incredibly successful entrepreneur. And Kashif, when I asked him, because he's the expert in DNA and code scanning, so is there a link here? He was actually able to point to a specific line of DNA code that if we hold this and it processes a particular way, we become more susceptible to addiction. So we must understand the context of who we are. But if we identify ourselves as a high achiever, understand that we are probably more susceptible to addiction. But if we are struggling with an addiction, understand that there's high performance inside of you. Addiction, in my belief, is high performance that hasn't been harnessed and unlocked. So if you can figure that out and find that root within ourselves, the sky's the limit for us. And that brings us to our last, not our final lesson here, because like I said, there's been 250 episodes up to this point, and I could easily give you a lesson from every single conversation. But it's episode 226 with Dr. Stephen Gundry. Your skin is a mirror reflection of the inside of your gut. This was profound, and this was something that I was partially clear on. I knew the importance of gut health for autoimmune function, for brain function. But to have him say that skin disorders, acne, are a byproduct of a poor and unhealthy gut was shocking. So check out episode 226, Is Poor Gut Health the Root of Your Addiction, with Dr. Stephen Gundry. A couple honorable mentions here. We didn't talk about the conversations that I've had with Dr. Glenn Livingston. Never Binge Again. We've had him on twice, episode 84 and episode 222. But the takeaway here is that there are so many links between food addiction and these behavioral addictions with pornography and masturbation. Or another honorable mention with Dr. Caroline Leaf on episode 67, How to Use Your Mind to Heal Your Brain and Your Body. An incredibly profound, in-depth discussion between the differences between the brain and the mind. Prior to this, so many people were using them in conjunction with each other. But your brain is not your mind. Your mind is not your brain. You can have a brain sitting there on a desk without a human mind. The mind is the human spirit. It's what makes your aliveness. So guys, like I said, we're going to link all those episodes down there below, but I wanted to take some time here this week to reflect, to share with you lessons, takeaways, how we've taken a lot of the work that we've done here and integrated into our curriculums, our books, our courses, exciting things that we have coming for you guys. But as I ask here every single week, we are committed to providing you every single week with the content, with the strategies, with the insights to take back control of your life and become the man that you're called and created to be. And if you could help us in this journey by sharing this episode with as many people as possible. But we're not stopping, guys. We got some exciting things coming this summer. We have some big guests lined up for you. We're looking forward to the next 250 and beyond. But if we got value out of this, guys, what have been your biggest lessons? I would love to hear from you. So share this episode on your social media. Send me an email at frank@rebuiltrecovery.com. I would love to know your biggest takeaway from the first 5 years of what we've done here with this show. God bless you guys. Coach Frank, we love you. See you next week.